Good evening. The hour of 6:30 p.m. having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel and the city website. The video is also posted on the city website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the homepage and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other board members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. Anyone who wishes to address the board is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. As a reminder, the minute taker is participating remotely this evening. Board members, please be sure to turn on your microphone when speaking. If the minute taker is unable to hear, they will ask you to speak louder or turn your microphone on. And hopefully I won't violate that. Thank you all for being here. I think first we do introductions. I'm Jane Taylor. I'm vice chair, but our chair is not able to be here this evening, so you get me.
Edward Guyout, board member.
Richard Clough.
Zach Leroy.
Thank you. We have two sets of meeting minutes. The first from August 19th and the second from October 24th. I have one comment to make, and I will say that I already discussed it with Mr. Guyo on the August 19th minutes, line 869, which is on page 23 of 104. The line currently says, Mr. Guyo state that given that the other properties are primarily parking in nature, he does not see how this development and the parking challenge here would affect those in any way. I'd like to be able to clarify that by saying Mr. Guyo stated that given that the other properties to the south are primarily parking in nature because the properties to the east and the west are residential with some business. So if that's all right with everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any other comments on the minutes from August 19th? Does anybody have any comments on the minutes from October 7th? Does anybody object to us having one motion to adopt both with the one amendment to the August 19th minutes?
No.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept both the minutes.
With the one change from
With the one change, yes, with the change as amended.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Guyo seconds it. And all in favor, please raise your hand. We have all of us here in attendance approving them. Although, Mr. Leroy, probably we should ask you to recuse because you weren't here, you weren't a member of the board at the time of those meetings. Even though it's not a formal rule, it's kind of an unwritten rule. Thank you. So with that, we will move on. Do we have any unfinished business?
No, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. Then we'll move forward with our hearings for the evening. The first one is ZBA 2024-26. The petitioner, Kathy Goodrow of 690 Court Street, requests a variance for property located at 70 Court Street, tax map 568-041-000. This property is in the Downtown Transition District and is owned by Gino A. Rinaldi of 75 Court Street, Exeter, New Hampshire. The petitioner requests a variance to operate an animal care business per Article 4.1.3 of the zoning regulations. And I'll now defer to staff.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Before we move forward with this application, I believe we have some recusals that we need to address. So,
Just to be clear, we have to ask for the vote to recuse? Yes. We were advised today by the city attorney to ask for a vote that will recuse me from this for a conflict of interest.
And could you state generally the nature of the conflict?
The owner of the building is a current client of mine.
Okay. Does anybody object to Mr. Leroy recusing himself?
No.
All in favor? All right, that's unanimous. Thank you. We'll see you in a bit.
Thank you.
thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And I also need to recuse myself from this application. My wife is an employee of the business in question, so I have not been involved in this application at all, and I will also be stepping away from the deliberation.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess that now we turn to Ms. Bruner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mary Brunner, I'm a senior planner and currently acting as the zoning administrator. So 70 Court Street is an existing approximately half-acre parcel with about 146 feet of frontage on Court Street in the Downtown Transition District. The lot is also in the Downtown Historic Overlay District, and it's the site of the historic Prentice House, which was built in 1828. Two major additions have been made to the original historic structure, one in the 1960s and one in the 1970s. Due to its age, architectural features, and its history, the building is ranked as a primary resource and, as such, is subject to the strictest historic district regulations. The site also contains a detached garage and a small shed. The applicant proposes to operate an animal care facility within the basement of the main building. This use is not listed as a permitted use in the Downtown Transition District. And I'm just going to read the use definition for you. It's defined as an establishment that provides care for domestic animals, including veterinary offices for the treatment of animals where such animals may be boarded indoors during their convalescence, and pet grooming facilities. An animal care facility does not include kennels or animal training centers. The subject parcel is surrounded on all sides by the Downtown Transition District. However, it is fairly close to residential districts to the north, both high density and low density, and more intense downtown districts to the south and east, including Downtown Limited and Downtown Core. Surrounding uses include a mix of office and multifamily residential. The property was originally utilized as a parsonage in a single-family home and later as a residence with a doctor's office. Most recently, and for quite some time, it was used by the Keene Senior Center, who occupied the building from 1962 through earlier this year. A variance was granted on this property in 1976 to waive the on-site parking requirements associated with one of those building expansions that I mentioned. The Senior Center sold the property earlier this year, and the property has been vacant ever since. So that's all the background I have on the property for you at this time.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? I have one because I'll ask it now because otherwise I'd ask it later. And that is, for what are the parking requirements for this particular use?
I can look that up for you. Hold on one second.
Okay, or when you find it, you can, get back to me. And the reason I'm curious is because my understanding, and obviously the applicant will speak to this, is that the applicant only wants to use a portion of the building. And I'm just curious as to what the parking requirements are to know what's going to be left for the other uses, and if we're, have the potential for seeing future variances on the building.
Sure. So the parking requirement is 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. I don't have the gross floor area of the space that they're using off the top of my head, but they are just using the basement portion of the building. They're not using the full building.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, if we could hear from the applicant, whoever is going to represent and explain what you want to do. Yeah, please sit there and make sure that the green light is lit and tell us who you are and all
If
that.
it's lit, then you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Kathy Goodrow. I live at 305 Ashby Road in New Ipswich. And I am the current owner of Doggone Beautiful Pet Styling, 690 Court Street in Keene. So I'm looking for a variance to operate the grooming business in the basement of 70 Court Street. We will only be using the basement. We won't be making any changes to the building at all. No walls will be coming down. Won't be adding anything to it. So we will maintain the historic nature of the building. We're not going to be doing any sort of renovations to it. We'll be using it as is. So Doggone Beautiful has been in business in Keene for over 38 years. And the current place that we are at 690 Court Street, the veterinary needs the space to expand his business. So he's asked us to find another place to be by the end of December. We have struggled to find a place to go to in Keene that'll allow our business until we found this space. The current owner did some testing for the noise from the basement, and we also did testing for noise in the basement. We had brought my personal dog down to the basement, had her bark, went outside to see if we could hear it. I couldn't hear anything on either side of the building. The basement is 3/4 underground with only a little bit above the ground, a couple of windows in the rear of the building facing the land in the back. So the noise was not an issue. And when the owner of the building did the testing, he couldn't really even hear it on the first floor. And that was in the building. So it's a very well-structured building. The traffic, I believe we're not going to be causing any more traffic to Court Street because we're already on Court Street. So, and as far as the hardship goes, if we don't get the variance, the hardship for us would be that we'd probably have to move outside of Keene because we're having trouble finding a space in Keene. So that is the hardship for us and for the city of Keene after us being here for 38 years. I do have with us all the owners of Doggone Beautiful throughout the years. All 2 of them are here with me. So we do have some legacy here in Keene, I would hope. And everything else is on the variance application that I submitted. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me.
Well, I think the most difficult one that we always deal with is the hardship. And that is related to the particular use and the particular property. So it's the relationship between the two, if that helps clarify it for you. The question I have is, do you have an approximate square footage for the area?
It's 2,000 square feet in the basement.
And does it have all the facilities that you need, such as water,
Yes, it does.
air, heat, basements vary.
It does have water, it has electricity, it has everything we need. We would have to do some plumbing work, but we're not gonna be making any changes. We would just be taking out a sink to put in a couple of tubs that we have, and maybe adding some electrical outlets if we need them, but no major changes to the space other than painting.
And can you describe what the entrance is? How
There-
people, the traffic flow and how people will go in and out?
Sure. There is a side entrance on the building with a ramp because it was a senior center, so there is ADA access for our older clients. There's a ramp that goes down to the basement, and then there's a door, a fire door there, and that's where they will enter. There is also a ramp. When you enter the building, you can either take the ramp down to us, or you could take a ramp up to the first floor, which is currently empty.
And how many clients do you have at a time? And what happens if you're not done with your clients and you've got animals that are waiting to come in?
We only have enough clients at a time for the groomers that we have. So we schedule them, so we have, let's say we have 3 groomers working that day, we would have 3 dogs come in, they would get groomed, and then the next set of dogs would come in. As far as waiting goes, there's nobody waiting. We're gonna have a space dedicated to the 10-minute drop-off, so people can come in, park there, bring their dog in, drop the dog off, and then leave. So that way that nobody's gonna be waiting outside, there's gonna be no dogs outside, we're not gonna have any training, no kennels, everything's gonna be done inside in the basement.
And are you going to have a space on site for, shall we say, the dogs to take care of their needs?
Yes, yeah, we will. There's usually a little space in the grass where we have poopy bags and a garbage bin for people if they want to do that before they come into the building. And that is also maintained by us on a daily basis. We go out there and we empty the garbage and make sure that it's all cleaned up.
And that's okay with your landlord?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody else have additional questions? I know I kind of monopolized the floor there. Mr. Clough, do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
Madam Vice Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to say our hours are like from 8 or 8:30 till 3 p.m.
Okay, can you hold that thought?
Sure.
What we do next is, unless you have anything to add at the moment, and we may have more questions. Is there anybody in the audience who wants to speak in opposition to the application? And is there anybody who would like to speak in favor of the application? And now's your chance to. And if you could come up to the table.
Hi, green light. Yep. Can you hear me? Yes. Hi, my name is Linda Claflin, Claflin. I live at 7 Dewey Circle in Haydenville, Massachusetts, and I am the founder of Doggone Beautiful way back in 1986 when Mr. Bragdon was where you are up there, when my knees were shaking. And I just wanted to say that we have so many people in Keene that have been clients for generations, and some now are elderly, and this ramp would be a wonderful thing for our senior citizens to come into the proposed new business. And as I had said before, our hours are basically sometimes 8 o'clock, but by 8:30, and we are out of there by 3, which is good because it doesn't interfere with the school buses, which is an issue. And we have clients that come from Bennington, Vermont, and they shop in Keene while their pets are being groomed. Brattleboro, they shop in Keene while their pets are being groomed. And the dog, it's a fairly quiet atmosphere, with the exception of a German Shepherd here and there that will bark, if you know German Shepherds. Thank you very much. Any
Thank you.
questions?
Yeah, any questions? Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Sofia Cunha Vasconcelos. I am the owner and resident at 21 Summer Street. I share a boundary with the property in question, and I believe that my living space is perhaps the closest building to the senior center. That's what I still call it anyway. Of the surrounding abutters. And I just wanted to say that I am a current client and have been for some years of Doggone Beautiful, personally and perhaps anecdotally. It's very convenient for me that they're going to be around the corner. I have, as I say, I've been using their services for some years. There is no waiting. It's always been incredibly quiet next to as you enter the building. There are no noises from the existing building. I can't imagine there's more insulation in that one than there is in the one that they're hoping to enter. I'm hoping that I am able to use their facilities around the corner from my own house. So,
Any questions? Thank you. Anybody else like to speak in favor? Hearing none, is there anybody else who wants to say anything on this application? Your last chance. Okay, thank you. In that case, I'll close the public hearing. And we will move into,
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to, we do have some public comments that were submitted that were written.
okay, I didn't know if you wanted to include them at this point, but we did have, by the way, a number, I think there were 9 comments that were received prior and were part of the record already. And there are several additional comments that I've asked Ms. Brenner to read into the record because my voice is failing. So go for it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this comment is from Carrie Carlisle at 111 Ridgewood Avenue in Keene. Hi, I just wanted to let you know that I cannot attend the ZBA meeting on November 4th, but I am in favor of the variance for Doggone Beautiful at 70 Court Street. I've lived in the Keene community all of my life, and they are a wonderful business. Thank you very much, Carrie Carlisle. Another letter of support, this is from Gail Rose. This email is in support of Doggone Beautiful in order for them to get their variance. This one doesn't have an address. The next one is from Irene Cedar-Shea. No address for this one either. Good morning. I wanted to send an email to express my support of Doggone Beautiful moving into the 70 Court Street location. As a property owner in Keene and Swansea, I have no objection to this move and fully agree with it. Personally, it would be easier for me to drive to the 70 Court Street location. Since customers only drop off or pick up their animals from this business, I do not foresee any parking issues. Please let me know if you need any additional information from me. The next one is from Jane P. Lane at 15 Russell Street in Keene. Good afternoon. I understand that there is a hearing on Monday regarding the request by Doggone Beautiful, now located at 690 Court Street, asking the city to adjust the personal service variance so they have permission to operate their pet grooming business in the downtown transition area at 70 Court Street. I have been a customer of many years at Doggone Beautiful, going back about 40 years with many dogs over the years. As a matter of fact, the dog I currently own was groomed at Doggone Beautiful today. I am writing to encourage the zoning board to allow permission for this wonderful Keene business to remain in Keene and specifically on Court Street. If noise is a concern, I can assure you that in all the years I have been to their business, I have never heard barking carried on by the dogs there enjoying their, quote, spa day. Thank you for listening, and again, I urge you to vote to allow Doggone Beautiful to move their business to 70 Court Street. And then this is the last one that wasn't included in the packet. This is from Michael and Francis Kaiser at 25 Avon Street in Keene. To whom it may concern, we are writing this letter on behalf of Linda Claflin of Doggone Beautiful, who is having to move her business out of her current location at 690 Court Street. She is trying to move to the vacant building at 70 Court Street. We are requesting the zoning board to consider approving a variance for this valuable pet grooming facility to move into a downtown transition zone. We have been using Doggone Beautiful for our dog for the past 12 years and feel this business would be an asset being closer to the downtown area. As Keene business owners, we support local businesses and feel it would be a shame if they had to close their doors for an extended period of time or even permanently. Please help them to continue to serve the Keene area with their successful business.
Thank you. Now, looking at the criteria, I was hoping that you might have some comments.
Well, I'll start. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. First off, we've heard from a number of people who are in support of this, and I don't believe that there's anything about this location that that would create anything contrary. And the type of use, I don't see that it has any sort of impact that that would be negative, if it is even noticeable.
I agree. If we look down take each of these as bullet points, the transition, low traffic, covered traffic counts seem pretty low. Noise, we've heard from the applicant, should be minimal if even non-existent. And traffic and parking, the parking lot is fairly large. So I think they've covered the minimum number of spots based on the square footage. So at least on aspect number 1, I'm comfortable with that.
See, I told you I'd forget to turn on my mic. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. Now, do you have comments on how it fits in with the spirit of the ordinance? Downtown transition, yes.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a transition. It is a business with an extremely low impact. I think that could be almost a definition of what a transition would be. It is a business, but it also has the low impact that you would be looking for if you were in a residential area.
Yeah, and as far as the substantial justice, this one is the weighing criterion. And the benefit to the applicant should not be outweighed by the harm to the general public. I don't see any harm to the general public. And certainly there would be a detriment to the applicant if this were not allowed. So if anything, it goes in favor of the applicant, at least in my opinion. Yeah.
Agreed, and I think from a community service standpoint, that needs to be factored in as well. That's a positive aspect of this.
And as far as the values, it's a vacant building. It's it's certainly not, helping its value or the value of its, abutters by being vacant. And even though it's not a full use of the building, I can't see, just basic common sense, that it would lower the value of either the building or any of the surrounding properties.
Agreed.
The statement about taking care of the little bit of the grounds and stuff, it means it's going to be daily observed at the least, which is, probably more than many rental properties. So I would say that's a pretty positive thing.
And then we come to the most difficult one, which is the unnecessary hardship. And, there's, the first issue is there a special condition of the property that distinguishes it from other properties in the area so that there's no relationship between the purpose of the ordinance and how it's applied to this property? That's always the tough one. So do you have any Yes.
Because the property has been used for the senior center and our opening statements from staff describing the fact that there have been variances and additions to the property, so the building has been added to, and it doesn't really conform to what its original purpose was. And also, honestly, if 2,000 square feet of a pretty usable basement, I can't imagine actually a lot of businesses saying, "Oh, that's a great place to go." It's a kind of weird niche that would be great to be filled by something like this, which doesn't need super pretty thing. I don't think any of your clients, while they're being worked on, are really worrying about their surroundings. So I think in that respect, it's actually a really good use for a basement. And knowing that the ramp is there, which is just an additional thing of making it extremely easy for these long-term clients to access. Even 2 or 3 steps can be a difficult thing, especially if you have a really, active, happy participant who's trying to drag you through the door. So anyway, I think it actually fits very well with that space, and not very many people would be looking for that space in other ways.
So the unnecessary hardship, is it for the applicant or the property? Just for clarification for me.
How the use is applied to the property and its relationship to the ordinance. Maybe I could clarify a little bit. The downtown transition zone, as stated in the ordinance, says that it is intended to accommodate a variety of residential open space and other low-intensity uses in a mixed-use environment of attached and detached structures. Development within the downtown transition district is intended to complement and transition into existing residential neighborhoods adjacent to downtown Keene. And it seems to me this is a relatively low-intensity use. It's probably a lower intensity use than the senior center. And it would be truly, as I think was mentioned earlier by Mr. Clough, a transitional use. There are adjacent residential properties. This is not exactly a high-intensity commercial or retail use. So I can see that a hardship is, the nature of the building and the property itself. And as far as this use is concerned, the strict interpretation of the zoning ordinance, to me at least, doesn't seem to make too much sense. And because of the building where it is, its historic nature, the limitations on its use, I think that creates a hardship by the property itself.
Based on the nature of the property, the structure itself.
Right.
Would agree.
The nature of the building. There's only so many things you can do with it. It'd be difficult without further variances or modifications to change the structure itself. And it doesn't seem that there is much relationship on the ordinance and the proposed use here. And the other component of that test is whether it's reasonable, and I think from our comments, we seem to feel that it's a reasonable use.
It's definitely a reasonable use. Mhm.
Does anybody have any other comments on any of the criteria? With that, then, I will ask for a motion.
I'll give it a try. I make a motion that the ZBA approves ZBA 2024-26, a variance for the property located at 70 Court Street, tax map 568-041-000 in the downtown transition district. The variance is to operate an animal care business per Article 4.1.3 of the zoning regulations.
I'll second that.
Mr. Mr. Guy is seconding it. Thank you, and now we will go through and vote on each criteria. First one, the variance is not contrary to the public interest. All those in favor? It's unanimous. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Substantial justice is done. All those in favor? Unanimous. The values of the surrounding properties are not going to be diminished by this use. In favor? Again, unanimous. And then 5, literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship because the special condition of the property distinguishes it from other properties in the area such that there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance and specific application of that provision to the property, and the proposed use is reasonable. All those in agreement and in favor? Again, unanimous. So now we get to vote on the whole shebang. All those in favor of approving ZBA 2024-26 for 70 Court Street? Again, unanimous in favor. Thank you very much.
Longtime clients. Longtime clients. Thank you. Okay, now that we've had our shift change, I should note for the record that Mr. Leroy has rejoined the board, and we now have Evan Clements here representing the staff. So we will take up ZBA 2024-27. Petitioner George Hansel of Tail Feather Strategies, Keene, requests a variance for property located at 7 Albert Place, tax map 590-093-000. This property is in the downtown Edge District and is owned by Jared Goodell of Keene. The petitioner requests a variance for new construction within 20 feet of the minimum interior setback that is required when a parcel in the downtown Edge District is abutting a parcel in the downtown Transition District per Article 4.4.1.e of the zoning regulations.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Evan Clements, planner, for the record. The subject property, 7 Aliber Place, is an existing .46 acre landlocked parcel with access to Marlborough Street via a private road named Aliber Place. The parcel contains an existing 3-family dwelling, single-family dwelling, and parking area. The parcel was recently 2 separate lots, commonly known as 3 Aliber Place and 15 Aliber Place, but were merged to make way for recent development in the form of 3 duplex dwellings that are located on the western side of the parcel. The property received 2 variances and a parking reduction special exception in August of 2024 for this duplex project. The 2 variances were relief from the Build To zone and an interior side yard setback requirement of 20 feet since the property abuts the downtown transition district. The subject property is adjacent to the downtown edge district to the northwest, north, and east, downtown transition to the west, and residential preservation to the south. Surrounding uses include the Historical Society of Cheshire County, Keene State Alumni Center to the west, residential duplex to the north and east, single family to the south. Multifamily and the Savings Bank of Walpole are located to the north on the other side of Marlborough Street. That's all I have, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. So, I guess first of all, 7 Aliber Place and what we heard in August that was titled 57 Marlborough Street, I just want to confirm that they're the same properties?
Yes, that's correct. I guess I got my old common addresses wrong. Since the property has been combined, they've received a new common address of 7 Aliber Place, but it used to be 57 Marlborough and 15 Aliber, I believe.
So could you explain a little bit or clarify for me, since we had already given a variance to modify that interior setback line to 5 feet, why we're here tonight?
I believe that would be best answered by the applicant.
Well, could you just briefly say, is it a different, I'm just trying to get it on the record from the staff.
They need additional relief from the interior side yard setback greater than what was initially approved by the board in August.
Okay, so it's basically a variance from the variance?
Or maybe a modification to the existing variance, but, so the initial variance set them at a 5-foot setback instead of a 20-foot setback, and now they need additional relief to be closer to the property line than 5 feet.
Okay, I just wanted to understand. Maybe we could hear from the applicant, and then I'm going to have a couple of comments on it.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're here before you again tonight in sort of an unfortunate situation, but to give you just the background on this parcel, this is, you reviewed it in August. It's the one that's on Marlborough Street, but it has no frontage, and so it created a situation where we had to get special approval from the city council to allow us to construct a new structure there, which we did. We came before the ZBA and we had to get 2 variances. One, which would allow us to build outside of the Build To zone, which in this case would be on Marlborough Street, which is impossible because it wasn't on the parcel. The second variance request, which was to build within the setback, the side interior setback, which the zoning code says has to be at least 20 feet in this instance where you have the downtown edge district up against the district closer to Main Street. And then we got a special exception for a parking reduction. All of those were granted and we were ready to go. We went forward to get building permits. The building permits were granted. And then we had a site survey done to sort of confirm where everything was, and a lot of that initial information was taken in. The footings were put in for the foundations were poured, and right after that, we discovered that the lot line was about 1 foot to 2 feet closer than we thought. And so there was definitely a mistake on the developer's part that they take responsibility for. Really what we're here for tonight is to sort of reset on that variance request that had to do with the side interior setback and present a new case for getting that variance approved with a 3-foot requirement instead of a 5-foot requirement. And ultimately, I think that there's a good argument to be made that there's no real functional difference to the public, whether it's 3 feet or 5 feet. When I looked back at the minutes from the meeting and the discussion, a lot of the discussion around the 5-foot setback had to do with the building code and fire safety requirements. And so one thing that the developer has done to help remedy this situation is work with the city staff to come up with some measures to upgrade the structural walls and some of the features of the structure closest to that property line, which would add additional fire resistance and take away any sort of safety concerns related to that extra 1 foot or 2 foot of proximity to the property line. And so we feel at this time that we can go forward, and if we are allowed to go forward and get this relief, it won't really change the interaction of these new structures to the public. There's a long-standing chain link fence that's on the property, and it'll still allow circulation around the buildings without any problem. We don't feel that it'll interact negatively with the neighbor or inhibit their ability to do much along that property line. And we've actually, as soon as this error was discovered, we reached out to USNH, the University System of New Hampshire, to let them know about it, and have been trying to be as proactive as possible, talking to them and letting them know where we're at with the whole thing. So other than that, the request is more or less the same as the one that I brought to you in August, but I'd like to go through the criteria again if I could, if you think that's appropriate.
Well, I'd like to say something first, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because the criteria is essentially the same, and I believe the minutes, the 5-foot concern was the concern between the buildings, not necessarily the concern to the lot line, or the interior setback line, to be precise.
Right.
One of our jobs is, and I wanted to hear from you first, is to determine if we've got the right kind of application before us. You know, is it a variance that we should be hearing? And frankly, I'm not sure that this is the right application. You know, we already have the application for the 5-foot setback from the interior line. And of course, we have to look at hardship, as you know. And the question is, mistake doesn't necessarily equal hardship. And it seems to me that this is really a more appropriate request for an equitable waiver of dimensional requirements. It certainly appears to me, without actually seeing an application, that it likely meets the criteria for presenting to us evidence of all of the 4 criteria. And just for the record, and I know you're probably familiar with it, and I know that Mr. Clements is familiar to it, but the public may not know what I'm talking about. So the criteria is that the nonconformity was not discovered until after the structure was substantially completed or after a vacant lot in violation had been sold to a bona fide purchaser. The nonconformity was not an outcome of ignorance or bad faith, but was caused by good faith error in measurement or calculation. The nonconformity does not constitute a public or private nuisance, nor diminish the value or interfere with future uses of other property in the area. and the cost of correction would far outweigh any public benefit to be gained. And having driven by there, I noticed it's not just a foundation, the buildings are up. So I was really surprised to see that, the building had continued after the error was discovered. And it seems to me that, I'm kind of, when I read that, it's sort of like, whoa, those are the circumstances that you have.
Yep.
You don't necessarily have a hardship because mistake usually doesn't justify a hardship. So I didn't know, before we go any further, whether you would be willing to either have us continue the application so you could discuss this potential with staff, or withdraw the application and file an application for equitable waiver. I'm trying to give you the best shot for
Yeah.
the right legal process.
Sure, and I can appreciate that, Madam Chair. I think at this point, if it looks like we're not going to be successful in getting the new variance application approved, we would definitely request a continuance to explore some other option. I think with the hardship criteria, I certainly can't argue to all of you that we need this accommodation because of a mistake that we made. That wouldn't be appropriate for you to approve. I'd rather have you look at it in the frame of mind of, like, I'm presenting this to you almost as a new variance request. And if I had given you the plot plan with 3.5 feet instead of 5 feet and said that we were going to beef up the walls on the property side, if that was a concern, we would be able to address any of those public safety concerns that were brought up at the time. And so I think ultimately nothing else has changed about this request, and having it be a foot off isn't going to make a functional difference. But I'm certainly not arguing that it's a hardship for us because the foundations are poured. That's not my intent.
And the building is pretty well up. I couldn't see from the street if all the buildings are up, but at least some of the buildings are.
Yeah, I mean, when I came in with the original applications, we were trying to get these things weather tight so we could do work on the inside over the winter, which you understand. And at this point, it's like in for a pound, in for, I think the decision was made to move ahead and make sure that those foundations were protected from the weather.
Right, so I'd like to get a sense from the board. Again, I don't think it necessarily meets the criteria of a variance because you're here based on a mistake. But that's my opinion, and I'd like to hear from the other members of the board, if I could.
I agree. It seems like an error, but could you go down the sequence of events as far as when the lot line issue was discovered and when the foundations were in and when the building continued beyond this photograph?
Yep.
At which point I
Yep.
think you knew of the error. We're just trying to get the sequence here.
So we received approval from a planning perspective, received a building permit, went forward and got a professional survey. And the original information that came out from that survey, I think the posts were found with a metal detector, and some initial survey results came back and it said, it's a certain distance away from that fence. And then actually we put the foundations in even a few feet inside of that. And then ultimately when it all was torn up and the posts were actually found, it was different than that, but that was after the foundations were poured. One of the difficulties here is trying to find contractors to do this kind of work in the timeline that the developer wanted to do it. And so having the foundations and the forms put in and then the foundations poured in the same day was a decision by the developer because they wanted to get the work done, and they didn't know if they would be able to get the contractor back to do it later.
Was that decision made before there was knowledge of the error in the lot
The
line?
knowledge of the error came about a day or two after the foundations were
Okay,
poured.
so the decision to move forward with the foundation work was based on the assumption or the knowledge that you had at the time that this was the lot line and you were within the compliance that the board
That's-
approved
That's
in
correct.
August.
I would say, this is really it is, to your point, Madam Chair, I mean, I see these as a good faith error that could pursue relief using that other process. But I also see the validity of resubmitting a variance request that meets all the same criteria of the last one that was approved.
Well, I guess my concern is, a variance runs with the land, and I'm not saying you're going to tear the buildings down. But an equitable waiver is just for the particular circumstance. If there was another building, say other buildings on that property came down and wanted to be replaced, they would be governed by that same 5-foot interior setback line that we'd already approved. But if we were to change it as a variance to this 3 or 3.5 foot, whatever it is, then the other buildings on that site would be, governed by that variance. So one of my concerns is that this is a very particular circumstance for these duplexes, and that there are other structures that would be impacted by an interior lot line variance. So that's one of my concerns, so that the mistake would only apply to these buildings and not to the remainder of the site. Again, Mr. Clough, do you have any comments?
I would, that, because the mistake and all of that was specific to these buildings, I agree with your assessment to it. I would feel uncomfortable having a variance that could be carried to other construction down the line, even though it's highly unlikely it would happen in our lifetime. It's still the fact of it that it is, in perpetuity until it comes before a board again.
My only, if I may, Madam Chair, my only response is that right now you could do it within 5 feet based on the variance that was granted. And so what I struggle with mentally with this is, does the 5 feet or the 3 feet really make any difference? And in this case, I really don't think it does, because there aren't any life safety issues really to contend with. I agree with you. From looking from the minutes, the discussion was about the 5 feet between the buildings, which wouldn't be impacted either way with this method. So we're open to going back. Obviously, we're in this sort of limbo, which is not great. And if the board is agreeable to it, we'd like to see this request approved tonight.
You're going forward with the construction, am I correct?
Right now, we're not fully, I wouldn't say. We're trying to get this situation resolved.
Well, there are workers there working, every day.
On an adjacent building that's also owned by the property owner.
Okay. Well, do you have any comments? I know this is all kind of new for you. It's your first meeting, and it gets sort of, whoa, what have I gotten myself into?
I don't have any specifics, especially if you're going to go down the avenue that you're suggesting. I'm just trying to better understand what options you are offering to the applicant before I can really fully interject any other questions or opinions.
Thank you. Again, I don't know whether this would be a sense of the board. I don't think we would have a formal vote on it. But again, as far as the application before us on the variance, I can't find a hardship. because the facts on the ground are, it was a mistake, a good faith mistake. And I don't know what the other board members, how the other board members feel on this, whether we should request the applicant.
Can I
Yeah.
put one more thought out
Sure.
there? Because just in the same way that a change in personal circumstances can't be grounds for approving a variance, in that I can't come to you and say, oh, my mother-in-law moved in with me and now I need a bigger house because she lives there. The reverse is also true. These changes in personal circumstance can't be grounds for a denial of a variance either. The evidence of the variance request really has to stand on its own without any consideration of those personal circumstances. In my view, that's my interpretation. But I just put that out there. If you feel very strongly in that direction, and we'd also need 3 affirmative votes to move forward, so that's an important consideration too. And if the majority of the board members present don't feel good about this, I would prefer that we continue it and try a different avenue.
Yeah, and frankly, if there's no reason why this couldn't be continued while you explore with staff an equitable waiver application. And then even if an equitable waiver were to be denied, and I'm going way down the rabbit hole of hypotheticals at the moment, you could still come back for a variance.
Okay,
But we
so-
would find that if those 4 criteria didn't apply, then the result would be a variance that you would have to come for.
So
But-
just to be sure, if you do continue this tonight, we could bring this back and present for this variance request again without prejudice.
That would be what I would suggest to the board, if they're willing to take that motion. And then if, after discussing with staff, if you wanted to come forward with an application for an equitable waiver, then you could withdraw the variance if the equitable waiver were to be approved.
Okay.
Madam
Yes.
Vice Chair, I'm finding myself in sort of a weird situation at the moment because we did have kind of an initial conversation and there was some advice given to the applicant when they received their building permit. We always recommend that you don't dig a foundation until you know where the property line is. We knew that this site development was going to be really tight. Part of the building permit process is a pre-pour inspection to make sure the forms are correct, the depths are correct. If the plans show rebar, our building inspector checks to make sure that the rebar was in place before the concrete was poured. Those inspections never took place. So there were certain decisions made by the crew on the site to move faster than was maybe prudent. And I'm really not trying to like argue one way or against on this application. But and some assumptions were made with the chain link fence as being the property line versus not the property line. George, correct me if I'm wrong, your initial site plan showed the property line at that chain link fence when you did the planning application? Would that be correct?
I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
But I mean, the admission of a mistake is not at issue here.
No,
mean,
and I
that's-
think there was probably potentially multiple mistakes.
Yeah.
I don't want to pin it on any one, but it seems that the situation arose
Right,
because,
and no one is contesting that on our side.
and-
Yeah, and I'm not
there's
trying,
no
and I'm
one-
not trying to bully the applicant in any way by saying this. I felt, in my experience with an equitable waiver, is a truly unforeseen circumstance has led to a result. And so I thought a variance application made more sense in this situation, which is why we're here this evening with a variance and not an equitable waiver. I'm happy to be wrong. if the board feels that an equitable waiver is more appropriate in this instance, I agree with you. That's a much easier test for the applicant. So ultimately, it's up to you.
Yeah, and I took the time today not just to read the statute, but also the LDC, the Land Development Code, Section 26.8, and the sections that follow it, and went into the state ZBA handbook for local officials, and I read all the applicable case law because I guess I'm a masochist, but anyway. And, you know, it's mistake, good faith mistake, that really is what governs. And, you know, I'm not going to argue an application, but it just seems to me that this just fits it, the criteria you have to prove. And as Mr. Clement said, it's a less onerous proof that the applicant has to bring before us. And since at least I'm having trouble with the hardship portion of the variance on the current application, that's why I'm making the suggestion. So, yes, Mr. Gaia.
Just a comment in that regard. I'm leaning to the mistake side of this equation, but it seems to me it's also a less risky path to have this board continue the application. You go after that waiver, and you can always come back if, you know, we have the criteria for this type of mistake. It seems that's a less risky path for the applicant.
Well, rather than go over all the same stuff again, would anybody be willing to make a motion to continue the application? I'm just looking at the calendar. When is our next regular meeting? Is December 2nd? Is that-
December 2nd.
So, I guess, I mean, I could make the motion, but if somebody else wants to make the motion, that we continue ZBA 2024-27 for a variance at 7 Albert Place to our next regular meeting on December 2nd. So that the applicant can explore the opportunity of an application for an equitable waiver on the property.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other comments? All in favor? Okay, that's 4 in favor, and therefore it's unanimous. And I guess that's about all the commentary I have.
All right,
So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate the dialogue, because I think it's beneficial to both the applicant and to the board.
Absolutely, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any new business?
No, Madam Vice Chair.
No, any communications or anything that's miscellaneous?
No more matters this evening.
Okay, thank you. Then I gather we stand adjourned.